Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, Wild and Ancient Himalaya. Discover Nepal and Bhutan. Presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Payal Mehta. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Over to you, Payal.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you always for such an amazing welcome. And I'll extend the welcome again to all of our listeners today who have tuned in. Welcome, everyone. As you all might know, and it's very clear in the topic, it's a Know Before You Go webinar. And through this webinar, we hope to help you prepare for the trip. So, we are kind of assuming here that all of you, or most of you who have tuned in today, are people who have already booked to go on this trip. So, it's that kind of a webinar. And for those of you here who haven't booked yet but are thinking about booking this trip or want to know about this trip, you will definitely learn something about this adventure for sure during this webinar. So what is this webinar going to include and in what order, right? So let me take you through that. So we'll go over the itinerary briefly. We are going to spend some time on the weather and packing list, what kind of transport we are going to have, how long the drives are going to be. We are going to spend time on activities, and discuss a little bit about what is the difficulty level, what kind of activity levels are going to be there throughout the trip. And we'll touch upon a little bit about the accommodation and the food. And we will have enough time today for question and answers as well, if any of you have any for me. Right? So this is kind of the overview. And without much further ado, we will get started. So let me give you a little bit about where in the world you're going to be landing. Where are these two lovely countries? Most of you might know already, but let me do this anyway. In Asia, this whole Asia, between two very large countries, India to the south and China to the north, we have the great Himalayan mountain range. And in this Himalayan mountain range, between these two big countries, are two very small countries in comparison. That is Nepal, which is here. I hope you can see my laser pointer. And very close to it, but not adjoining, there's a little bit of India in between the two, is Bhutan, right? And these two countries are in the same sort of geographical regions, in the mountains, and so close to each other. And yet, these are two very, very different countries. They have a very different identity from each other, a very different history, different religion, different culture, and whatnot. So, very, very exciting trips to both these countries and exploring a little bit of both of them, right? So, here is Nepal and here is Bhutan, right? Let's go and have a look at the itinerary, right? So, for this trip, we have two different types of itineraries. One is what we call the classic itinerary, which is 11 nights and 12 days, and the other is the photo one. I'll take you all over both quickly. So, our trip starts in Kathmandu, right? We spend just one evening here from the starting of the trip where we have a welcome dinner, we meet each other, have a little briefing for the trip, and then the next day we fly to Chitwan, which is Nepal's first national park, right? It is a beautiful protected jungle, and this is where we are going to spend the next 3 days, 3 nights exploring the wildlife of Nepal. From here, after spending 3 amazing days exploring wildlife, we are going to fly back to Kathmandu, spend another we'll have about half a day there, and then we sort of wrap up our Nepal part, and next day we take our international flight to Bhutan. We land in Paro because that's the only international airport in Bhutan. But from there, we go to the capital city of Thimphu. That's where we spend the first 2 days in Bhutan. From there, we go to Punakha for 2 days, and then we drive back to Paro, where we'll have the final 2 days of our trip in the classic itinerary. Right? Now, let me take you through the photo expedition. For those of you for who this is applicable, who book themselves on the photo expedition, this is a slightly longer trip. Most of it is almost the same with little differences. In the photo expedition, you start in Kathmandu, we'll have the evening of the welcome presentation, but after that, you will have one extra day in Kathmandu where you actually leave the town and go slightly to the east for spending the first half of the day there. And then in the evening, you spend time in the old part of town and then come back to your main Kathmandu hotel. So you'll have an extra day in Kathmandu, and then, just like the classic itinerary, you go to Chitwan, spend 3 days there exploring wildlife, looking for all kinds of things in the jungle, and then come back to Kathmandu for half a day. And then you take your international flight as well to Bhutan. We go to land in Paro. You go to Thimphu. In Thimphu, on the photo expedition, you just have one night. Then you go to Punakha for 2 nights. That's another town. And then you drive to Gangte, a different destination where you'll be spending 2 nights there and doing a longish drive back to Paro for your final 2 nights of the expedition, right? Great. Now, from there, I just want to say that when all of us, whether on the classic itinerary or the photo itinerary, when we go there, we have, of course, the expedition leader who's with you throughout the trip. But like this gentleman here in the photograph, you're going to be meeting and we are going to be working with a lot of local people in the field who are going to sort of assist us, serve us, share their knowledge with us, drive us around, and whatnot, right? So in the Nepal part of the trip, of course, like every NatHab expedition, you have the expedition leader with you from day one till the last day. But in Nepal, we have a whole lot of different people at different times who will be with us to sort of enhance your experience. So when we do the Kathmandu part, for example, we will have a local expert, of history and culture who will be joining us for those. When we are in the jungle, we will have the local naturalist guides with us besides the expedition leader, right? In Bhutan, it's a pretty consistent team, right? So during your week in Bhutan, we will have, along with the expedition leader, we will have the local guide who's with us throughout. So from the moment we land in Bhutan till we depart, and also the driver, right? So this team stays constantly with you in Bhutan. Uh, let's look at now the weather and the packing list. Very, very important. I know for sure, especially when you're preparing to go on this trip right now. So, as you know, that our trip, the Nepal Bhutan trip, is run through November, from November through to April, right? Um, and the weather changes a lot during these months, as you can see in the chart here. And also, you will see that all the destinations where we are going are at very different altitudes in the hills, in the mountains, right? So, with change in altitude, also, there is a lot of change in temperatures during the trip. And also in each of these, the daily temperature varies a lot, um, day by day, and also the daily temperatures are different in different months, right? Let me make this a little bit easier. So, um, in Kathmandu, for example, right, I won't go through each of these boxes, but just to tell you that November and March have mild and pleasant temperatures. December and February tend to run much colder, right? So if you're booked on a trip that are in December and February, you will need warm clothes much more than those required in maybe November and March. And in April, it's a much warmer time of the year, right? So you will need much fewer warm clothes. But for all of these trips, it's best to have layers. I will take you through the packing list and what kind of layers you will need. But this is just to show you the average temperatures that one expects in each of these months, in each of these destinations, right? And here I have also sort of written that in Kathmandu on the classic itinerary, we are here only for 2 nights, but in on the photo itinerary, you are there for 3 nights. So I'm hoping that details like this, Chitwan, which is at a much lower altitude, much warmer, for both the trips, we are there for 3 nights. So you need light clothing for both of these. For Thimphu and Paro, we are there for 3 nights during the photo trip and 4 nights during the classic itinerary. I have clubbed Thimphu and Paro together here because they are at a similar altitude and they have similar temperature ranges, right? Then Punakha, one of the places where we go in both the itineraries, is much lower in altitude compared to Thimphu and Paro. And this is the sort of temperatures one expects during the different months. And then Gangte, which is a destination only on the photo trip, it is pretty high up and can be quite cold, and you will be out in cool times, cool hours of the mornings also in Gangte. So you're going to be needing warm clothing for sure, right? For those of you on the photo trip. Um, Let me take you through the packing list now. So let's see what you will need. No matter what time of the year you're going to be coming, because these are hilly regions, and of course we are going to the plains in Chitwan, but you will need sun protection, right? So hats, caps, sunglasses, an absolute necessity for this trip, irrespective, like I said, of the time of the year. Um, because even in the cold times, the sun comes down pretty strongly, right? Even in the winter months, when you're out during the day, the sun comes down quite strongly. So you will need your sun protection. Besides that, a good raincoat. Now, the months that we are in are not monsoon months, but still, this kind of jacket is very useful. It doesn't weigh much, doesn't occupy much room in your bag, but it's useful if there are these occasional sort of unexpected showers. It is also useful for people who are traveling in sort of the late November, December trips, because in Chitwan you can have a lot of dew, right? So it's very useful at that time because you have constantly drops falling from the trees when you're driving through the jungle. And a jacket like this can be very handy. Also, it works as a very good sort of wind protection layer, right? So please do consider packing one of these in, uh, irrespective of the time of the year. This, for the cooler months, I usually like to have a fleece vest. It works as a very good layer. So even if you're just wearing a t-shirt underneath, a vest like this, I'm wearing one right now actually, can be very, very useful. to sort of move around the day and have just something on, because if you are out in the open and it's sunny, you can zip it open and your vest is hanging. And then imagine that you enter a cold temple or something like that. You can zip it up, right? This I carry for the cooler months. So December and February, this is useful as a layer that goes over your fleece vest. It's very useful. Besides that, a nice cool shirt, a light shirt for your safaris, especially during the warmer months. So you would want this, especially for March and April. Very, very useful. T-shirts for travel days and otherwise just on warm afternoons, you're back at the lodge, and you want to change out of your full sleeved shirts. It's a very, very handy t-shirt to have. Just short sleeve t-shirts. Full sleeve t-shirts, this is something that I prefer again in cooler months. These t-shirts work very well inside jackets, right? Versus shirts. So I prefer to pack a few of these in the cooler months. What else do we have? Beanie and gloves. Again, very useful for the winter months, of course. So if you're doing a trip in December or February, these are very useful because, of course, most of our activities are during daytime, but these are useful for early morning safari time in the cold months, December and February. But the beanie and the gloves, are also very useful for your last early morning hike. So during the final hike, like early morning hike, when we are going to do the tiger's nest, I'll come talk more about it when we come to activities. The initial part of the trip of the hike, when you're just starting out, we start off quite early in the morning. It can be really, really cold. And also when we reach the top of the hike at 10,000 feet and we are spending time around over there, the beanie and the gloves can be very useful when you're not walking anymore, right? And you want to keep yourself warm, right? So do consider packing those in. What else do we have? Long johns are not necessary for all the departures at all, but again in December and February, especially during the photo trips, because you're going to be out for some early morning photography and you might find yourself just standing around for those times. Uh, Warm thermal underwear, long johns, are very useful. Other than that, for pants, long pants, highly recommended for two reasons. One, for the sun and the mosquitoes, so either time of the year. Um, but also during our city explorations, full pants are recommended because we often visit temples and it is customary to be well covered, right? So full pants, clothing where which is not sleeveless, so where your shoulders are not exposed, so sleeves, those kind of things are important. So you will need this. I have put a picture of convertible pants just to show you that these kind of pants are useful because once you're back at the lodge and it's warm during the day, you can easily convert your pants into shorts or even change into shorts during that time. What else do we have? Footwear, very, very important. So, again, for months of February, March, April, during the day when it's warm and you don't want to wear hiking shoes all the time, sandals are great, but I highly recommend that you wear closed-toed sandals, right? So, these kind of shoes, these kind of sandals are great even for walks, but you want to make sure that you have closed-toed sandals. We don't want to be stubbing our feet in exposed roots on the paths or uneven staircases and things like that. These are very good protection. Other than that, of course, you need a good pair of walking, hiking boots, shoes, because there are a bunch of good hikes on this trip. What else? Other than that, this is just to tell you that I have often seen guests who carry these good walking shoes, but they are slip in, slip out, so you're not bending down to tie laces. These kind of shoes are very useful for days in Nepal or Bhutan when we're just doing city sightseeing, we're just walking around town and you don't have any hikes, but we are visiting temples because they are very easy to take off, right? To visit temples. So, a very good pair of shoes to consider. I've often seen guests use this as traveling shoes also, so on flights and things like that. So if this is a part of your usual travel kit, they are very useful on the trip also. Socks, very important. Of course, you will need good hiking socks for your hikes. But other than that, also, I often keep a pair of extra socks in my backpack for the days that we are in Kathmandu or we are doing any of the sightseeing in Bhutan, because especially again on the winter months when we take our shoes off outside, even during the day when it's nice and sunny outside, a nice sunny winter day, but the moment you enter temples, the floor can be quite cold. So I take my shoes off, you're allowed to have socks, and it's actually useful to put on an extra pair of socks to walk around the temple so that your feet don't get cold. So, very important to pack in some socks. Masks, again, we don't have any COVID protocols, no rules, of course, anymore. But masks have kind of become a part of travel kit, I feel now, and they're very useful because if you end up getting a cold or a cough during the trip, it's useful for you to cover yourself up just for the safety of the others in the group. But also, if you find yourself in a situation in a crowded place, at airports, or in some of the old parts of town that we are going to be visiting, and if you feel more comfortable wearing a mask, it's always handy to have one of these on you. What else? Swimwear. There are a couple of places during the trip where you have access to pools. So if you're interested in, a quick dip in the middle of the afternoon or during some downtime, please do carry swimwear. Camera, of course. Most of us have them on our phones. Those of you on the photo trip, I'm sure, have your plans of carrying whatever kind of camera gear you want. But make sure you pack it along with all the other necessary things. So, chargers, enough memory cards, and so on. Binoculars, very, very useful on the trip. Not only for the Chitwan part, where, of course, which is our main sort of wildlife destination on this trip, but even in other places, we end up carrying our binoculars, especially if you're interested in smaller things like birds, butterflies. Do carry them with you even on your other hikes in Bhutan. On NatHab trips, even if Bhutan is our like a more sort of cultural active part of the trip, we are always looking for natural wonders, right? You're traveling with natural habitat adventures after all. What else? Yes, reading glasses and maybe an extra pair of reading glasses. It's always useful to have that in case you misplace one or it breaks or you sort of, something happens to it. These are useful sometimes on the trip for reading menus when we visit local restaurants and you're choosing from a menu, or when restaurants give us a written down set menu just so that you can read what you're going to be eating. Very, very useful for those times. Medication, please don't forget all your personal medication that you need on the trip. So that's about it for the packing list. If you have any questions, Please note them down and we will address them at the end of the presentation. Documents and other things that you need on the trip to be packed. Let's see what we need. Tickets, of course, you have your international tickets that you'll be carrying with you, you'll be packing them, but we have all your internal tickets for all the internal flights, right? Visa. So if you have pre-done your Nepal visa, you will need to carry that with you. The Bhutan visa we take care of, and all you need is to show your passport. Having said that, here is a very, very important point for all of you to keep in mind. The passport. At the time of booking this trip with NatHab, all of you have given passport information to the NatHab office. Your Bhutan visa has been generated using that passport information. So please make sure that you're carrying the same passport. Many times, between the time of making the booking for the trip and the actual travel, many times guests have either had their passport renewed, or sometimes there is a damage and they've had to have a new passport for whatever reason, or you have multiple passports. In which case, make sure that the passport information that you have given to NatHab, you are carrying the same passport. It is mandatory, right? After that, coming to the money bit. So how much money do you need? This is often a question in our travelers' minds. So let me take you through where you need money. Um, the You don't need to carry a lot of money at all. So let's start with that, right? However, a lot of us like to have some money on us always during travel. At least that's the kind of traveler I am. But let me take you through where you might need money. So, one, about tipping and gratuities. So, all of your local tips are covered. So, drivers, local guides, naturalist guides, people who serve us at restaurants, people in the hotels, all those tips are covered by NatHab. However, if you feel like someone's gone above and beyond, we do welcome you to tip them a little extra. That's absolutely fine, and it's totally at your discretion. Other than that, the only tips that are not covered are the expedition leader and your Bhutan local guide. Right? These are the only two tips that are not covered in your trip cost. So for that, you might need cash. However, your expedition leader tip can also be given via e-tipping now with the new provision that NatHab has. So it's up to you whether you carry cash for that. It can be carried in just a few large bills if you want to carry cash, or you can choose e-tipping as well. That's also fine. Other than this, you need money for your personal spending. So if you're interested in buying some souvenirs for people back at home or yourself, you might need money for that. And other than that, alcoholic beverages, for that you might need to pay. All your other meals and soft beverages during the trip, the cost for that is covered and taken care of by NatHab. Now, even regarding souvenirs and alcoholic beverages, most of our hotels accept credit cards. Actually, all of the hotels accept credit cards. It is only sometimes that due to weather conditions or something like that, that the credit card machine, if the connectivity is down, the credit card machine may not work, in which case you might need some backup money. Having said that, again, for these rare occasions where the credit card machine is down and things like that, the expedition leaders always have backup cash on them, and they can always help you settle at that moment. So none of these things are a big worry, but just to let you know that these are the kind of places where you might need cash money. Other than that, for those of you who are planning to get your visa on arrival in Nepal, you will need $30 USD in cash at the airport, right? So I hope that is clear. But again, if you have questions, we'll take care of it later. Transport. So, what kind of transport is there during the trip? You will, of course, be arriving via international flight from home to Tribhuvan International Airport in Kathmandu. This is where our trip starts. And once you land, this is where you will have the usual immigration, customs, all of that. You pick up your bags at the sort of baggage belt, and you come out, and there will be a local representative waiting to pick you up. From Kathmandu airport, all of your arrivals will be done there, and we pick you up and bring you to their hotel in Kathmandu, which is literally just like a 5-8 minute drive. It's very, very short. And then during the rest of the trip, so in Nepal, for all the Kathmandu sightseeing that we are going to do, we will have a bus for that, and to sort of bring the group to the airport for our domestic flight to go to Chitwan, right? So we have a bus for that. From there, the domestic flight, it's a small sort of propeller flight, a small domestic flight. It's also a short flight. It's at about 20 minutes to half an hour, something like this. It's a short flight that takes us from Kathmandu in Nepal to Chitwan, which is our wildlife destination part. And over there in Chitwan, when we get off the airport, there is a short drive to our lodge from the airport, which is all less than an hour. So most of the driving around in Nepal is not too long. It's between an hour, and for the photo departure people, maybe some slightly longer drives, about an hour and a half or so each way to reach the places where you want to spend time, right? In Bhutan, there are slightly longer drives. So over there, we have various different sort of drives ranging from about an hour and a half to 3.5 hours for our classic itinerary. And for the photo itinerary, there are slightly longer drives, actually one longer drive involved in your itinerary, which ranges for about 4.5 to 5 hours. Okay, but other than that, nothing. In Bhutan, from the time we land till we depart, for the whole trip, we have the same bus, right? Which is really, really convenient. It's the same bus, the same driver. There is not much shifting around and changing, no internal flights in our Bhutan part. And it's lovely to have this. It's a very comfortable bus. And also because it's the same bus, some of the things can actually be left behind. This bus is also equipped with umbrellas, walking, hiking sticks. So just to tell you that those are also available in the Bhutan part of the trip, and they are always on this bus, right? Um, Now, coming to activities, which is the most important and the most exciting part of our trips, and of course of this presentation as well. So let's look at what kind of activities we have, right? So just to start with, in for the photo people, you have a day in Kathmandu that you start with, a full day in Kathmandu, where you will be going out, driving out to a place from where you have mountain views for mountain photography. And then the second half of the trip, you drive to a totally different place in one of the old cities, just at the edge of Kathmandu, where you'll have photo opportunities of old monuments and things like that. So a little bit of standing around in the cold in the morning, and then in the later half of the day, in the evening light, you will have time to sort of go about the old part of town to make most of the photo opportunities that the old town presents. After that, this is common again for both the itineraries. All of us go to Chitwan. We have this kind of open vehicles for our safaris, and we will be driving around in these. We have about 3 safaris in Chitwan to explore the jungle there on safari drives. And just to sort of tell you here that safaris in Nepal, in Chitwan, this is a jungle. It's a dense forest. There are also grasslands, but even these are dense grasslands, right? And safaris here, wildlife viewing here is different from Africa. Most people associate their Africa experience with how safaris are, but it's different here in Chitwan. The forests are denser, and also our wildlife are not in great numbers. It's not, we're not going to see hundreds of almost any animal, right? They are, our animals tend to be solitary or in small herds. We are going to look for them. Of course, we are going to look for the rhino, which is the highlight of Chitwan. Chitwan is a global example of a conservation success stories of rhinos, and of course we are going to be looking for them. We are going to look for other mammals like herbivores, different kind of deer, pigs, whatnot, and also they're very, very elusive predators like tigers and leopards. We are going to look for them. Of course, the chances are it's really hard to find them. They're really elusive and they have excellent cover for them in these jungles. But we are going to be looking for all of these. Other than that, also, Chitwan, because of its location, right? It is just as the Himalayas end and the plains begin, the floodplains begin, that's where Chitwan is located. And this, at sort of the edge of the mountain and the plains, is an excellent place even for birding and just diversity of even other smaller creatures, beautiful butterflies, other insects. So it's fantastic, but just don't expect an Africa kind of a safari experience. But if you're lucky, we will have great views of the rhino and other wildlife, and you will have, opportunities to view and photograph all this kind of wildlife while on safari. But also, we are going to do a boat safari. So you will have an experience not just driving around in the forest in the jeep, but also the edge of Chitwan National Park is a beautiful river. And we will be doing one boat safari in the river as well, spending about an hour or so on the boat looking for wildlife on either side on the banks of the river. And at times like that, this is the kind of wildlife sometimes you get really, really lucky to see. A big freshwater crocodile basking on the bank, right? So I love this photograph just because of the kind of opportunity, just the possibility that can be on a safari like this. Look at this big crocodile basking, and behind that, there is a lady from the village who's collecting wild grasses. Look at the coexistence, and lots of other such stories tend to unfurl as we, look for wildlife in Chitwan. After our Chitwan sort of 3 days, we come back to Kathmandu, and we have a plan of visiting another old part of town. So, for the classic itinerary people who are not doing the old part in the beginning of the trip, here's when we do it, and the photo people also do this. So, there's a second chance, and these tend to be really beautiful old sort of cities where, once upon a time noblemen lived and kings lived and common men lived, and there are all these different activities happening even still. So these part of towns are also still alive. There are shops and there are people who live in these parts of town, but some of these buildings and monuments are over 2000 years old, right? So they are beautiful architectures, and this is just in this photograph, you're just seeing sort of a broad wide angle view of the town. But if you look in closer, just the carvings in the windows and doors and all the different things that this place has to offer, it's really really a beautiful visit. Of course, how much time we get there often depends on the flights. So the flight from Chitwan to Kathmandu, they can be a little, how do you say, there can be expected delays. We are all in the mountains, and all of you are well-traveled people, and how there can be expected delays due to weather or visibility and so on. But hopefully, if all goes well, we will have enough time to visit these. What else? So after this, we will have a flight to Bhutan. Early in the morning the next day, after we finish our Nepal part of the trip, we have a flight to Bhutan, and this is just about an hour long flight, not too long at all. As you saw, the countries are situated quite close to each other. And if the skies are clear, you may have really nice views of the mountains, including Mount Everest, that we fly just parallel to the Himalayan mountain range, and we land in Paro, which, according to me, and even some of our guests who've traveled with us before, say that is one of the most beautiful airports in the world, maybe. So take your time as you walk into this airport and look at all the beautiful art and different little models that they have made here. I feel like the Paro airport in itself is an experience. Yeah. You come in, you collect your bags, and you meet your local guide who will be waiting to receive all of us at the other side. We meet them, and our part of Bhutan starts. It is such a different experience. After having spent our sort of the previous time in Kathmandu, which is a densely populated, bustling part of Asia, and then you just in an hour's flight, you reach Bhutan, and everything changes. It's cooler, it's quieter, it just has a completely different vibe and atmosphere. And in Bhutan, as I mentioned earlier, with Nepal, we kind of finish, we close our main wildlife experience, and in Bhutan is where, which is a lot more cultural part of the trip, but it's also the more active part of the trip. So in Nepal, where most of our sort of experiences are, revolve around safari, driving around and walking around in town, that kind of experience. And over here, while we are doing a lot of drives in the bus to take us from place to place, there are going to be a lot of cultural visits to temples and also to old forts and fortresses, right, in Bhutan. Um, this picture I specifically put up here to also tell you that there are in Bhutan lots of staircases to navigate every single day. So make sure you're well practiced with staircases. There is literally no way to avoid them. Yeah, so any of these places that we visit, they are staircases, but trust me, it's worth it. They are beautiful buildings, and there are such amazing stories connected to all of these. which our local guide will be waiting to share with us. Other than that, other than visiting temples and fortresses, which all are revolve around Buddhism a lot in Bhutan, we will be visiting even some places of arts and crafts. So weaving centers where they have beautiful traditional weaves. We'll actually get a chance to watch them weave. There we also visit, for the people on the classic itinerary who have an extra day in Thimphu, we also visit the paper factory and things like that. Also, we'll be visiting maybe areas where we will see where they have masks. They have mask making is a big part of the Bhutanese culture. They use these masks during their festivities. So each of these masks are a different character and there are stories attached to it, right? So we may get a chance to visit some of these places where there's a display of masks. Other than that, in Bhutan, we will also have a chance to watch and maybe even try a hand at their national sport. So, the national sport in Bhutan is archery, and our local team are very excellent tutors, and you will get a chance to try your hand, be tutored by them, and try your hand at archery as well. It is amazing to try it and even watch them play. They are so passionate about their national game. What else? For those on the photo itinerary, when you go to Gangte, you will have an opportunity to walk around and look for the blackneck cranes. Very often, these activities will happen early in the morning. Depending on where the cranes are, it might involve some driving and walking. It's hard to say how much you'll be walking, but over here, you are at 10,000 feet and it will be quite cold. So be prepared for that. But it is, again, a really lovely valley to walk around. And you will also be visiting even the monastery over there. So, like I was saying, that the Bhutan part of the trip is not just cultural, but also there are hikes involved, right? Now, what should you expect? So, there are various hikes in Bhutan that are planned, which range from hikes that are as short as just 1 hour long, hikes that are quite gentle in inclination and not much climbing. But there are also hikes involved that are like our Tiger's Nest hike, which is the toughest hike of the trip, which can be an average of about 5 hours going and coming back down, included, right, in total. So there are this whole range of hikes that we have. Which hikes we do during each departure, there might be slight variation depending on the length of the day, the weather, how we are doing with time during our drives or our other sightseeing. So, all of that included, the expedition leader and the local guide each time plan which hikes they are going to do, which routes they are going to take. But like I said, they range anything from an hour to the final hike, which is an average of 5 hours. Um, while these hikes are planned, it's not like the whole trip is all about hiking, right? I hope you've got that idea. There are all these other experiences that are woven into our experience in the Bhutan part, where you're walking around town, you're probably trying your hand at archery, visiting a local farmhouse, and so on, visiting temples, monasteries, forts. But there are opportunities to hike. So it's a fairly good balance. And while talking about hikes, I also want to say that in Bhutan, like you saw, we are a multi member team, right? So there is an expedition leader, there is a local guide, there is also a driver who often participates in activities if we need them. So most of these hikes, we are able to accommodate different walking speeds. Also, alternatively, for the hikes, if we will be explaining each time what to expect during each hike, how much inclination it is, how steep it is, and the duration of the hike that we expect, we will be telling you each time before each hike. So on the previous day, actually. So if you feel like you want to opt out, that is also always possible to either sit out the hike, or sometimes it is even possible for us to have, while the rest of the group does the hike, to have you take the vehicle and maybe do something else in that meantime, right? So please do discuss with your expedition leader. Let them know of any concern that you might have, whether you're concerned that you're going to be walking slowly, or you feel like you want to skip a hike, a particular one that you think is too tough, or you're not up to it that particular day. Please let them know, and we are usually able to accommodate sort of all preferences related to hike, almost always, right? So the key is, please talk to your guide about it, right? Even during the final tiger's nest hike, it is possible. Anyway, before I come to that, this is just a screenshot to show you that if you go on our website and you go to the itinerary, our itinerary says that the physical requirements of this trip, for example, this trip is rated as moderate to difficult. And we have seen that oftentimes these words mean different things to different people, right? So what is difficult for one person may not be difficult for the other. So if you click on the physical requirements, there is a really nice description also. If you ever, after this webinar, if you want to go back and refer to what is expected physically out of you, please go over and read through the physical requirements section, right? So if you click on it, this sort of pop-up opens and you can read through what kind of staircases and what kind of elevation and what kind of walking hours are we talking about. Now, talking about the final hike, the toughest hike of the trip, which is also the finale, the Tiger's Nest hike, right? So we often get a lot of questions about this hike. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time here talking to you about this hike. Um, Remember, this trip is planned so well that this is literally the last thing that you do on the trip. Before that, all your smaller hikes have happened and you're kind of primed and prepped, and we make sure you're ready for the Tiger's Nest hike. The Tiger's Nest hike, the elevation change is, so we start at the parking lot where the vehicle drops us off. We start there really early in the morning. It is very, very cold at that time, but you sort of dress up in layers, and literally within the first 10-15 minutes of your walking, you're warm enough, you're already stopping to peel off layers. The path of the Tiger's Nest hike, it's really beautiful. It's a mix of coniferous and oak forests, the kind that you're seeing in the photographs here. The path, it's really not just about the destination, it's also about the journey, and it is so true for the Tiger's Nest hike. Every time you're walking, looking around, every time you stop to catch a breath, there are really beautiful views around you. Yeah. The path, as is quite visible here in the photograph also, they are not very narrow. They are really broad, comfortable walking paths. where two people can easily walk side by side. So even if there are people coming down, it's very easy, it's comfortable, and for most of the time, it is you are almost continuously climbing during this hike. For most parts, the climb is not too steep, but there are sections where the climb gets a little bit steeper, where from one step to the next, there are large steps and you are gaining height, right? In general, when you think of the Tiger's Nest hike, in your mind, you can divide the hike into three parts, almost three equal parts. The first part, the first one third of the hike, when you do that, which is the longest part, the longer one third, sort of, and has little bit more climbing in that, more steeper sections. That one third brings you to this lookout point. It's like a little tea house and cafe where there is a chance for you to put your bags down, to rest your walking sticks, get a cup of hot tea or coffee, and that's also your chance to just sit and look at the tiger's nest. Just the sheer magic and the beauty of the tiger's nest for me actually lies in the view of it from the outside. The fact that somebody built these temples, the tiger's nest is actually a set of temples. It's not just one temple, it's a complex of little temples, and that somebody decided to build this on this vertical, like sheer cliff, right? And it's a wow moment to just sit down and spend a few minutes quietly just watching, maybe photographing the tiger's nest from here. Sometimes clouds cover it for a time and then the clouds go away and play a little hide and seek with you. But still, it's a beautiful little stop and it's perfectly timed at covering almost one third of the hike. After this, also I must mention here that from the parking lot to this first one third, there are also ponies available. So if any of you want to use a pony to go to navigate this first one third, you can use ponies. You will have to let your expedition leader know about this on the previous day because the ponies are in high demand and they do get booked out, right? So if you let us know in advance, we can book secure a pony for you. The pony rides are not extremely comfortable, but it does save you walking at least for this one third. This service is available only while going up. While going down, you would have to walk down on your own, right? So that's about the first one third. The second one third, again, is a climb. It is a little bit shorter, but not much shorter than the first one third, but it does feel easier, right? You come to this, and during this middle section of your trek, you it brings you to a viewpoint that is at the eye level with the tiger's nest. And this is again a fantastic second long stop. We usually put our bags down here and take a rest and sort of uh, just admire the tiger's nest from here, take photographs, photographs with yourself also, of the tiger's nest also, and all of that. After here, the third part of the tiger's nest, the final part of the tiger's nest comes. Now, from here, the last one third, right? So as you can see in this photograph, you are at eye level, but you're across the mountain from here, right? So you are at a different face of the mountain. And between you over here and the tiger's nest, there is a big sort of V-shaped valley, right? And this V-shaped valley has proper staircases with a railing. So Over here, you actually climb down, you lose altitude, and then you climb back up to reach the temple. That's if you decide to do and go all the way, right? It's totally possible for you to choose to stop at any of these at any time during the hike. We have people, all of us, the local team, we distribute ourselves with different speeds of the group. And at any point, if anyone wants to feels like it's enough and wants to go back, they've had great views of the tiger's nest, we will have someone to accompany you, take you back down, and take you back to the hotel, right? It is possible to do that. Now, if you do decide to go all the way and you reach the temple, our local guide does a little tour for you inside a few of all the temples. So maybe you'll visit two or three out of, there are about 7 or 9 temples, I forget right now, but you visit a few of them, and he gives you a nice guided tour, and you come back, do that V shape again where you climb down the steps, climb up the steps again, and then make your way down to the base. Right? So that's how we describe the Tiger's Nest hike. I hope this helps. Like I said, when you're climbing, you usually take off your layers, it gets very warm, but when you reach the top again over here or inside the temple, it gets cold again. So your warm cap or your gloves or your warm socks or extra pair of socks are very useful when you're walking around inside the temple. Great. So that's about all our activities. I hope this little talk has given you a good idea of what to expect in terms of activity levels, difficulty levels, and if you have any questions, please ask me at the end. Coming to the accommodations, I don't need to spend too much time here at all. Our accommodations in Nepal and in Bhutan are both very comfortable, they have air conditioned, they have all the amenities that one needs to stay comfortably. Um, in Bhutan, however, I must mention again that even our accommodations have staircases. So to go from your room to the restaurant or from your room to the reception area, you are going to need to navigate staircases. So basically, once again, there is no escaping staircases in Bhutan, right? See, I've made a little animation there just to remind me to talk about the staircases. Um, Going forward, about the food. I know food is not why a lot of us travel, and it's not the most important part of our travels, but like most NatHab trips, there is plenty of food and very good food available even on this trip. You're going to have an opportunity to try the local cuisine. Nepali food is very similar to Indian food if you're familiar with, that general kind of cuisine when there are a lot of mix of spices. You will have opportunities to try a lot of the local Nepali food. And in Bhutan, Bhutan's cuisine is not as evolved as Nepali or Indian food, right? So Bhutan food tends to be quite simple and limited, the local food. The photograph here is of a dish called emadatsi, which translates to chili cheese, right? And chili cheese is like the national dish. It is food that local people eat every single day. These chilies can be really spicy, but we will have an opportunity to try this. Maybe we can do a really hot chili cheese and a little milder chili cheese to just cater to various spice levels of our guests. Having said that, there is also other international and Western food available on the trips. In the Nepal part, usually our food kind of alternates almost between traditional food and Western food, where you'll have options to maybe order a pasta, or sandwiches, or anything else that you feel like eating. In Bhutan, again, also there is a lot of option available. So while you do have opportunities to try local foods, there will be opportunities to have Western food. It kind of mixes up. However, if any of you are not okay with any of the foods or have special dietary requirements or even preferences, please let NatHab know. It is very useful for us to have that information in advance. Due to any reason, if you realize something after reaching the destination that, oh, this kind of food is not working for me, I thought I liked it, but I don't, or whatever it is, please let your expedition leader know. Almost always, we are able to provide alternatives or work with the chef to get you food of your choice. We really want all of our guests to be well fed, well nourished, etc., all of it. So while we are very focused on your experiences in the outdoors, on our adventures, we also want to make sure that the food is to your liking. And on this trip, especially, except for a couple of local restaurants in Bhutan that we are going to visit, maybe barring that, we are able to produce a large variety of options for any of you. So, with that, I think I have covered almost everything that I think you need to know before you go on your Nepal Bhutan trip. We are really waiting to start the season off in November, and we would love for you to come join us and experience these places with us. And with that, I think I will end my presentation and open the floor to questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Payal. All right, before we get into the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that if you do have a question, feel free to submit it via the question field in your control panel. All right, so let's get to some of these questions real quick. So, when we're shopping or tipping, is it a requirement to get local currency or are US dollars going to be okay?
For shopping, we need local currency, and there are opportunities both in Kathmandu and in Bhutan. Bhutan, in fact, the airport has an ATM where you can take out local currency, you can withdraw cash if you need, so you don't need to fly with that, fly with a lot of cash to change. You can even withdraw. It's possible to do that in both the countries. For tipping, US dollars is absolutely fine. Everyone accepts US dollars. Having said that, even for shopping, most of the bigger shops and hotel souvenir shops accept credit cards.
Great, thank you. So, on both of the tours, are there going to be hotels where we're staying that I can actually do some laundry?
Yes, very good question. Thank you for bringing that up. I totally forgot to talk about it. All of the hotels have laundry service. And in Chitwan, in fact, these rules keep changing, so please don't quote me on that. But at least until last season, every day one could do 4 pieces of laundry for free. It's complimentary. In other places also, laundry is possible and it's not too expensive actually.
Good to know. Thank you so much for that. So, let's talk about the stairs for a second. Are there going to be handrails on that last section of the hike to the Tiger's Nest stairs?
Yeah, Tiger's Nest stairs, the last section, there's handrail throughout the whole V that you're getting off and climbing up.
Got it. Thank you. And can we go inside the Tiger's Nest?
Yes. So the Tiger's Nest is a complex of small temples, and when you reach the top, you will enter and visit some of the temples inside.
And what is the elevation of the tiger's nest?
10,000 feet.
10,000 feet. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. What about weather, the impact of monsoons and landslides and flooding at Kathmandu? Are we going to have to worry about anything like that?
No, you don't have to worry about that simply because our the monsoons are just finishing now in Asia, in our part of the world. So we are towards the end, and by the time our season starts in November, the monsoon and the big rains are over. Like I said earlier, though we are not in the monsoon, we are actually in the winter and springtime. Right from November, our winter starts, and late Feb, March is our springtime, April is summer. During that time, we don't, it's not monsoon, but we do have occasional showers, but they're not very heavy. And it's the same with the snow also. We don't expect snow even in like December or February in Bhutan, but there can be small precipitation, like light precipitation. Any of these times, it can just, these are mountain regions, you know how mountain weather goes, and there can be sudden showers, but nothing that will cause landslides or things like that. At least that's not normal. However, with global climate change and all that, every year some unexpected thing happens. Either it's extremely high heat temperatures or extremely cold temperatures or rain. So you never know, but it's not at all typical for that to happen at this time of the year.
Thank you. So, what is the internet going to be like? Do you recommend buying a phone card, or are we going to have enough connections locally?
Very good question. All of our hotels have Wi-Fi and internet connectivity in the common area as well as in the rooms. So, and all of these have free internet connectivity. Uh, Sometimes, due to weather, internet connection can be slow or it can intermittently get cut off. But we are not completely out of connectivity at all during the trip.
Good to know. Thank you. And what about visas? Is that something I should get before traveling, or do I need to get it while I'm there?
So, Nepal visas, you have an option to get an e-visa electronically before your before you fly, right? So about a week before also you can get it online, right? Your Bhutan visa we have already taken care of. If you have booked the trip already, your visas have already been taken care of. All you have to make sure is that you carry the right passport, right? Now, Nepal visa, if you are not doing the e-visa prior to your flight from home, you can get it on arrival in Nepal. Also, you will need USD, US dollars 30 in cash ready at the time of getting your visa at the airport. I hope that's clear.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Unfortunately, that's going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to throw it back to you for your closing comments.
Thank you, Rob. I always like doing these Know Before You Go webinars because I kind of live through the trip while putting it together so that I can prepare you for the trip. And this time, especially, it was very special because I'm planning to go on a big trip myself on a holiday with my family. And I kind of know what it feels like while you're trying to pack and prepare and thinking of temperatures and difficulty levels. I felt more empathetic, and I hope that came across. And you got all the information that you needed. I hope this helps you prepare because we are waiting to welcome you and to start with this season. We've had a nice, quiet, long period and the season is starting in November. I'm leading the first trip and I can't wait to get started. So, welcome you all, and those of you here who haven't booked the trip yet, this is a fabulous experience to very, very special countries. We have lots of stories to share, lots of sights to view, lots of tasty food to taste. So, please sign up and we will be waiting to welcome you.
Sounds wonderful, Payal. Thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to
Absolutely.
thank everyone who tuned in today. So if you are interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, give us a call at 800-543-8917, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including our registration links on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.